My name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Naisha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Okay, good morning and welcome to another broadcast of AccessTV.org, where you'll be hearing the undisputed truth. And welcome to summer. Today's the first day of summer, the longest day of the year. This morning, we're going to continue our series on redlining and gentrification, mostly the subject of redlining. And our guest this morning is my childhood friend. We used to go to Clarence A. Barber School back in the 50s. Attorney Cynthia Jennings.
Good morning, Charles.
Welcome to the show. Had to get that in. Oh, by the way, that was in Northeast Hartford, which we affectionately call Hooterville. But anyway, let's get right to the subject here. Redlining and gentrification. As a civil rights attorney, I need to ask you, is it a civil rights violation to have a population of people live in abject poverty for over 100 years through this government-sanctioned project called redlining?
Well, actually, Charles, redlining is against the law, and therefore it is a violation of your civil rights if you are the victim of redlining, or if you live in a community that redlining is taking place in. Redlining is generally the exclusion of loans, any type of real estate transactions, insurance, and in terms of providing resources to a particular area of town.
Okay, so community economic development was just a no-no, basically.
Yes.
Okay.
In certain areas.
All right. This is actually a universal project. I heard from one of Bernie Sanders' volunteers. He watched our broadcast with Professor Jack Dougherty, and Reverend McCauley will flash up where they could find a link to that interview. And he told me, Charles, I saw your interview, and I just came from Iraq, and they have the same practices there. So it's a universal project where they isolate and oppress people through redlining. And as I mentioned in another interview, where everybody's under the impression that the conditions that exist now came from the civil unrest when Martin Luther King got assassinated and they had the riots and what have you. But that's not true, because back in the 30s, the Ritters, to their credit, tried to stop the city of Hartford from redlining the neighborhood that we call the Red Zone, Clay Hill specifically. That's because that's where my knowledge is coming from, and basically North Hartford. They were met with getting their house firebombed and what have you, because as I had mentioned before, it started off as an anti-Semitic project, but then when African Americans and Jewish people started migrating together, that's when they really turned the gas up. Of course, you know about the story with Black Wall Street in Oklahoma, where the city was flourishing and the government came in and burnt the whole city down. It wasn't so extreme here in Hartford, but the practice is still happened, and it's still going on now. And the sad thing about it is, like, 97% of the world population doesn't have a clue what redlining is. And I understand that, to my chagrin, some politicians don't know about it, which I find surprising. But anyway, that's still here. There. The 3% that know about redlining and gentrification is people like yourself and I, the business community, and the politicians.
Well, I will say this, that redlining has led to the economic destruction of huge numbers of people. And particularly in Hartford, when you're talking about Clay Hill area, where they've actually had maps that had red lines on them, and actually marked out areas of town where they would do no real estate, well, no investment in particular. Right. The banks wouldn't invest, the insurance companies wouldn't insure your property, And real estate was just, being able to purchase real estate. You couldn't get a mortgage.
Right.
So it made it extremely difficult for people to acquire wealth, because wealth is generally acquired through the real estate that you own.
Right.
The other thing is that I know I lived in Newark, New Jersey, and for a brief period of time, and in Hartford, Connecticut. And both cities were going through something called blockbusting. Like the first year of Weaver High School, it was 95% Jewish. The fourth year, it was 95% black. It was like that at Weequahic High School in Newark, New Jersey, too. 95% Jewish in the first year, 95% black. And what happened was there were real estate predators that were going around if a black family moved into your neighborhood, and it was called blockbusting. And they would actually go and try, if a black person moved in, a black family moved in, they would go and warn all the other families and then try to make money off of the sale of real estate. So blockbusting was also was closely related to redlining. But what happens is with blockbusting is you could then establish a red line zone. Once you have, all one race in that area, then they could redline it and no one would get any resources. Right.
And to give credit to the statistics that you did in terms of the white students, the Jewish students in high schools. I went to high school in 1968, came in September. Okay. We had a very diverse school. Mm-hmm. But after April the 4th, when Martin Luther King got assassinated, mostly all the European students left. And we had 3% European students population. Then that's when the government said, oh, we're going to take your accreditation away because we don't think that you can compete academically with your white counterparts. I mean, we grew up with these folk. So for 4 years, we fought to keep our accreditation. And we went through a lot. Weaver High School was just a very big challenge, in terms of survival. But that just to give credence to what you said, because not only blockbusting, but white flight and things of that nature. Now, the good thing about it, in my personal experience, is that we were able to purchase a house on Pembroke Street in Northwest Hartford, right up the street from Weaver, because probably a white family probably left and moved to West Hartford or wherever the Europeans went for white flight. So, there could be some pseudo positives to it, but all in all, it's a very, very negative practice. And, it really destroyed, like you said, urban America. And now they're going to try to gentrify urban America. They're going to try to do social engineering by moving all the poor people to Granby, Suffield, and put up the toll booths and what you want over here. You can't afford anything over here, because if you don't have a business or real estate in urban America, you're not going to be able to afford to live here. And that just goes along with what you're just saying. And like I said, this practice just continues. They built that stadium. Where did they build it? Trumbull in Maine, right at the red line. I mean, it's obvious, but it's not obvious to 97% of the people. But, they make it pretty clear that they just want to get rid of you. They don't want to see you anymore. They don't want to spend a lot of money on gas driving from the suburbs into here. So either they're coming into urban America or they're moving further out to the Everglades, messing up the environment out there to build their multi-million-dollar houses and what have you, but they're trying to definitely get away from us.
Well, the urban areas have been treated as colonies, and a colony is simply a place where people take out the resources and don't live in that community. Right. And
poverty pimps.
Right. Well, yeah, it could be poverty pimps, but definitely Hartford is a colony. We've had so many resources taken out. We have developers come in and develop and make money. They leave. They'll look for tax breaks, and a lot of times after they get their tax breaks, they'll leave. Companies are leaving us. We have companies that live here. I think it was the Hartford came in, and
Aetna's about to leave.
Right, Aetna's leaving, but the Hartford now also nationally. It's the move for companies to move their businesses out of the suburbs back into the city,
right?
Which is what happened with the Hartford. They moved out of from Windsor or wherever they were and moved, I think, 700 or 800 new employees back in Hartford. that doesn't mean that Hartford got any of the employees. They had said that all the jobs were filled. And so that means that 700 or 800 people are actually living in, coming to work in Hartford.
And they don't spend a dollar here.
Right. And they don't, not only do they not spend a dollar here, the company that's here is not hiring Hartford residents.
Oh, no doubt. But, we thought, now I've been knowing about redlining for forever, because I've been involved in community economic development for almost a half a century. We thought that we were going to nip this problem in the bud when we asked for linkage, linking downtown development with the neighborhoods. It was a good fight, okay? But when we said that we wanted to stop all the traffic from coming to Hartford, I guess they got a hold of our leaders, funders, and said, hey, if you guys do that, we're just going to cut your funding and get rid of all the CBOs in the city of Hartford. And so they flat out rejected us for linkage, linking downtown development with the neighborhoods, because in that case, in terms of the stadium, let's give an example. That stadium, Hartford residents would have been guaranteed 100% of those jobs if we had linkage. The YMCA started off as a $100 million project in the North End. They scaled it down to $17 million and built 2 YMCAs, downtown. If we had linkage, that project would have stayed a $100,000 project. They would have had a pool. It's probably the first pool in the United States, the first Y in the United States that don't have a pool. They try to make some kind of excuse that black people don't swim. Come on. All the projects that came into Hartford, North Hartford especially, have been scaled down except for community health services. And to the late Governor O'Neill's credit, he gave us $6 million in expansion monies, for community health services. Now, that was intestinal fortitude, because I know his people were like, oh, no, we don't want you to give that $6 million to these people in that health center. But he did it anyway. And his administration, Howard Rifkin, I don't like to mention a lot of names, but people that was in his administration, they had intestinal fortitude. And they should be honored today, even posthumously, because that was a gutsy move on the part of the O'Neill administration. And you know this, we were young guns when those things were happening, with Kerry and Jackie Anderson and Annette Carter and, Wilbur Smith and those type of people that wasn't going for no nonsense, okay? They was like, this health center, is here, and we need to expand it to help it to become the gem that it is now. Now, what's going to happen to it in the future, who knows? Because with this Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, and the secret meetings that the Senate, the right-wing senators are having now, coming out with a new health bill, who knows what's going to happen to public health? Mm-hmm. It's like, they don't want us to be healthy anyway, so they're going to do anything they can to eliminate resources for us to see doctors and what have you. But to your point, and it's very accurate, we've been watching this whole thing play out, and it's going to be interesting to see when the brown race is going to be the majority race in this country. We want to see what the backlash of that's going to be. What else are they going to come up with? They had redlining, gentrification, and what else? What else? We don't know. We'll see.
The thing about redlining is that it has led to extreme health disparities in our community. Our people are less healthy. Our people are less employed. So, if you're not employed and you get sick, you have a unique problem, and you're more likely to get sick because of the stress that you're under when you're unemployed.
Living day to day.
Mass incarceration, especially in the areas that are redlined, because it's just, it's okay to just take a group of people and lock them up and throw away the key because they're not working anyway. And, it's back to the bootstrap theory where pull yourself up by your bootstraps. No, we're not getting, we don't have any, right, what boots? Okay.
Right.
So the bottom line is that we have to recognize that educational disparities, health disparities, mass incarceration, all of those things go along with redlining, because that takes away the resources of the people and the ability of the people to make money and support their own families and acquire wealth through real estate.
And it damages the psyche of the people. Here's an example. You got kids standing on the block with drugs in their pocket and a European kid is painting a line in their neighborhood making $25 an hour. Okay? Now, who's saying anything about that? If you go out here and ride around anywhere, you will not see a person of color on a construction crew. I would like to get the statistics and see how many African Americans was hired for fast track. Very little. They'll hire an African person from West Africa or a Hispanic person or any other ethnic group than African Americans are getting jobs. And like, we got the NAACP. I pointed this out to them. Didn't say anything. But institutional racism, and all these other tactics that they do to keep our people down, they're using them.
They're using them, and we are not using what we have.
I know.
We absolutely, if there are elected officials who are not addressing our needs, we need to groom people and get them to run for elected office. And we need to support them so that those individuals who are not bringing in the money that we need in this community and not providing with the resources, those individuals will be in training to take over.
Right. But to your point, the first thing that we need to do is we need to give people political education. I mean, it's good to go out here and rah, like, yeah, I voted and this, that, and the other thing. What are you voting for? Do you know what a Republican conservative is? Do you know what a liberal Democrat is? Do you know what a Democrat is? Do you know what a Dixiecrat is? Do you know these terminologies? People need political education because, some people are under the impression that, they want to blame everything on the Republicans. The United States of America is the only country in the universe that has a two-party system. It was set up because of the Federal Reserve and what have you. The two parties aren't much different. One is subtle and one is more blatant. In other words, Republicans hate you and demagogues use you. It's as simple as that. And so, like for example, the conditions in Hartford, they weren't caused by Republicans. The last Republican administration was Ann Usello, and that was way back in 60. Mm-hmm. Well, she was elected in 1967. Now, I'm not saying that the Tea Party and the Republicans aren't doing their little damage, but the city has not been run by Republican administrations since our beloved Ann Usello. So people need to get a grip and see the big picture like you're saying.
Well, I think one of the things we also need to do is, how do we get our political education? We were mentored by someone. Mayor Perry took me at 17 and started, have me volunteering with her for years. And then she decided that I had dropped out of high school. I needed to go back to high school. I needed to go to college. And she said she would double my salary if I would do that. I was making $5,100 a year. I came out as making $10,000. But she did do that. She did hire me. And I did work for her, for many years until she went out of office. So that's where I got my political training, between her and Wilbur Smith. Wilbur Smith would tell you to do things like, he said, well, we're going to deal with, there was a time when they didn't have any black UPS drivers. And what did Wilbur do? He did a demonstration. He said, okay, we're going to demonstrate. You all lay down in front of those UPS trucks. I'm like, Wilbur, they're going to run us over. We get killed. He said, you'll die for a good cause. Lay down. I mean, these are the people that taught us to do what we have to do to get where we're going to go. Speaking
about Wilbur Smith, I can guarantee you that if he was a United States Senator and Joe Wilson called the president a liar on Congress floor, Joe Wilson would not be a senator today, mm-hmm. because Wilbur would not stand for it.
That's right.
My political education came with me sitting in the corner of my living room watching Ella Grasso, the Dempseys, the Kennellys, and all those folk come, United States Senator Bill Carter, all them. They used to come to my house because my father was a very powerful, behind-the-scenes power broker in the political world. Mm-hmm. I sat in the corner, 7, 8 years old, and just listened. And I made up my mind, I'm not going to be no politician. I mean, like, most of my friends became politicians, Eddie and Eric and Kenny and all them. I said, no, I'll just stay with the community, and, do what I need to do. And I'm glad I made that choice. I mean, I have nothing against you guys, being politicians and all that. That's a fine and dandy career, if you want to call it that. But I didn't want any parts of it.
But you're still a politician, and you're still extremely political. And you have to recognize that, and that's how you were raised, and that's how you're effective. You don't just go in and say, okay, I'm going to work in this nonprofit organization and collect my paycheck. You don't do that. You'll establish, you'll develop programs, and you'll set up, you'll establish movements, and you have goals about what's going to change and what's not going to change in the community. That's what being a politician is. It is not just collecting a paycheck to sit in an office.
POLITIC. I look at it as just putting out lies, taking in cash. I mean, like, I don't, like, politics is just like religion to me. It's just too divisive. It keeps people, divided, and it's just not a really healthy type of, it's just not, to me personally. I mean, like, this is just my, and like the views on this program are for me, the individual, not because, Access TV told me to say this or whatever. This is just my views. I have issues with politics and religion because I think they're the most divided things on the planet. So, I mean, that's, my just personal thing. But back to the subject of redlining. Where do we go from here? Like I asked Professor Dowdy, where do we go from here? I mean, like, it's, it's gotten to the point now where it's kind of apex, because now they got the new slavery project called gentrification rolling in here. How can we stem the tide to this, all this?
One of the things that we have to do is we have to establish political power that understands that redlining is real, and if they're exercising their power over a district, they have some change to make, and they have some fighting to do on the Hill or in City Hall, wherever you go. You cannot sit there and not fight this, because all these people that are in poverty, sick, unemployed, are depending on you to produce.
Absolutely.
So it's not an option that your job is more difficult if you represent a community that's redlined. And so we have to recognize that. We also have to, as a community, have a plan for what we want in our communities. If we want a supermarket, if we want a bank, if we want there was a time when you couldn't find a drugstore in Hartford, except for Ford and James on Main Street.
Right.
You had no drugstores, and CVS wouldn't come in, Walgreens wouldn't come in, none of the big stores would come in, which was fine because Ford and James did very well. But bottom line is that we have to establish what we want in our communities. We have to socially engineer our children. I'm working with a program called Mentoring in Medicine, and they've already graduated more than 1,100 Black and Latino doctors. And it started with 3 African-American doctors that worked, or emergency room doctors, that decided that they were going to do something to change the face of medicine. Even in Hartford. I mean, I had a program called Plan B many years ago. And why did I care about that? I cared about changing the face of the fire department, the police department, the post office, the correction department. We have 14 correction officers.
I remember your project very well.
Oh, boy.
And you were very, very good in what you're doing. But I want to go back and I want to highlight something that you just said. Volunteerism. We wouldn't have gotten to where we are now if we were not volunteers.
That's right.
That's so true. Anybody that you see has been successful in this society, they either did volunteerism through Junior Achievement, Vista volunteers like Eddie, myself, because, I'm the son of Omega Psi Phi and Delta Sigma Theta. Well, they're Omega Omega and Delta Delta. And if you ain't do no community service, it's like if you ain't worked tobacco when you was 15 years old, then you wasn't in the family.
That's right.
He didn't have no DNA. But volunteerism, and I'm glad you made that point, because what we need to do is we need to grab some of these kids, get them out here to do some door knocking. The next cycle, when the folks are going up for election for city council, or midterms or whatever. We need to grab a group of kids and say, let's go out here and knock on these doors and give these folks some information. You know, we teach them first, give them a little political education classes maybe on a Saturday morning, and with a nice little breakfast and lunch or whatever, 2 or 3 hours, and give them some political education and let them hit the bricks. And then they'll be able to know who's living in their neighborhood. They'll be able to give information, you know, I mean, like studied information, not just pie in the sky stuff, some real factual stuff. And that's how we build up our new base. I have 27 grandchildren, okay? And like, I want them to have a clue of what they're going to be up against. Now, they got high tech, this, that, and the other, and people don't talk to each other like we're having this conversation, or we rather text. I want our kids to have a conversation with one another, eye to eye, you know, and this way you could get a gist of really what's going on in this world, because a lot of people don't have a clue. They just get up from one day to the next. They go to the bodega and get them a bag of potato chips, throw the empty bag on the ground. The neighborhood is all messed up because you know what? There's no schedule for street cleaners in the hood. You go on the DPW and ask somebody, well, when are they gonna come around and clean up our streets? But I tell you something. The next show that I do, I'm gonna show you some graphic illustrations of redlining. And to the credit of some people in the community, they tried to address these things, but weren't successful. And I just hope that people don't vomit when they see what I'm going to show them on the next show, because it's frightening the way people in urban America have to live. And you know, I don't understand it. The state of Connecticut made $400 billion on the lottery. Where did that money go? And now they have, I guess, this bill 7050 that just came through, and they're going to do some kind of takeover or whatever. I mean, like, the state of Connecticut owes the city of Hartford in payment in lieu of taxes at least $6 million for the XL Center. Why aren't we collecting that money? Why isn't the city of Hartford collecting that money? Why? I don't understand it. And there's plenty more money that the state owes the city of Hartford. But now what? The state is crying broke? I don't believe it.
It's not whether it's broke or not. The fact that now when the state is unable to pay, they just changed the law that says that if we're unable to pay the $50 million plus a year that we owe in payment in lieu of taxes to the city of Hartford, then if we're not able to pay, we don't have to pay. So they just made they changed the law.
Oh yeah, they make the rules as they go along.
Right.
You know, and like I mentioned in a show, an interview that I did with Evelyn Richardson. She said, Charles, what do you think about the political climate now? As we're coming into this election cycle? I said, well, this is the first time a homegrown candidate has not been elected. And, you know, that struck a chord with folks because, you know, Mr. What's his name? Broden, you know, he's a very smart guy. His wife, they're both, I guess, Rhodes scholars. But I don't know. I don't live in Hartford, so I really can't tell people in Hartford what to do. But I would question some stuff that's going on. I guess his wife is like the chair of the ZBA or something like that. Is that true?
She is, but she was appointed by Pedro Segarra when he was mayor. So she was not appointed by her own husband to that position. Okay,
but even though she's in the office, it doesn't present a conflict of interest that her husband now is mayor, or they're going to let her go out. They're going to let her serve out her term and then.
Well, absolutely. You can't discriminate against a woman because her husband takes an office.
Oh, okay.
That is wrong. And I think that we had that in other people's offices too, where they might have taken office and their wife was already working there. You cannot then turn around and say you have to let your wife go.
Well, that's good to know. That's definitely good to know, because I'm pretty sure that this situation may come up in the future, and we'll just watchdog it and see if, like, if you were my wife and I wanted to be, say, chair of the stadium committee before you were elected, do you think they maybe come after me because of the difference in culture or whatever? Or what do you think? You think it's going to be fair across the board or what?
Excuse me. There is such a thing as discrimination, and you cannot discriminate against anyone based on their marital status. So you really can't turn around and penalize a wife's opportunity to do whatever she's going to do in life because her husband is taking.
Well,
position.
I've spoken to Mr. Broden. He's a very intelligent gentleman. I haven't met his wife yet, but like I said, I don't live in Hartford. I live in hard-hit New Britain. I'm still kind of reeling that we lost the Rockets, but I had an opportunity to go to the stadium. A very, very nice place. Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness, very nice. They were recently voted one of the best minor league stadiums in the country. Mm-hmm. Now that gives credence to the fact that because the stadium was real controversial and what have you, we got a little gem going here. And the thing that impressed me about the stadium was I walked around and saw a lot of Hartford residents employed there.
That's right.
That made me smile.
They make them wear
I went in there
name.
and bought me a $75 sweatshirt because I got a little cold. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to show these people that I do support the stadium, despite all the controversy that that happened. As a place, the thing was being constructed and what have you. This stadium is going to turn out to be a gem, and I think that made it be the turning point of some of these negative things that's going on in the city of Hartford. And to Pedro Segura and the 3 African-American brothers that put the bond package together, to their credit, I want to give them, a good nod because it did generate some revenue into the city. It got people to get together, because sports always gets people together. Right. No matter if you're extreme right, extreme left, or, pink with purple polka dots. Sports always brings people together. Mm-hmm. Now, we can just encapsulate that and put it in our general society. We wouldn't have half the problems that we have now, but that's
besides that, they're actually working with young people. They're allowing young people to play their playoff games in this stadium.
Love it.
I mean, it is a beautiful thing.
Love it.
And they have taken on mentoring and internships with young people in the schools in the community. I mean, they have really made a commitment to the city.
And you know something? About 10 years ago, they were saying how the game of baseball was diminishing because they couldn't find good talent in the United States, and then we brought in like the Marianos and all those folks from Cuba and Dominican Republic and what have you. Now, with this stadium, we have an infusion of local talent.
That's right.
Back interested in the game of baseball. So, like I said, to Pedro Segura and all those people that were involved in the stadium, they probably don't know it right now, but they did something for the game of baseball. Because I hear Rob Dibble, he has this on ESPN. He raves this place. They do broadcasts from there. Okay, we need to support it. I'm going to go back and buy me a couple of T-shirts and a cap. And when I move to Florida, I'm going to be sporting my Yard Goats gear. And they be like, oh, Yard Goats. Yeah, you know about the Yard Goats? Oh, yeah, they got a nice stadium. I said, yeah, you should go on up on vacation and visit there. And then we can increase our tourism here in Hartford and fill up the hotels. And as we build up, and as we build North Hartford up, we eliminate the red zone. People will come up to North Hartford, have something good to eat. And like to the mayor's credit, I like a statement that he made. Come on up and have some habichuela in the North End with us. Come on and have a good pizza in North Hartford. Come on to the Jerk Pit and have some nice, West Indian cuisine. I like that about Luke. He ran a good campaign, okay, because he drew to the potential of Hartford becoming better than it is now, and I'm looking forward to coming back and visit. And seeing some of these changes and positive things happen, to our great city. And maybe you'll be president of the Chamber of Commerce by then,
Right.
or Metro Alliance.
I don't think
Maybe
so.
I don't know. Maybe Oz won't want to give away his position
I
that
don't
quick.
think
Huh? But anyway, I think the highlight of our discussion today was the idea about volunteerism. We need to get these young folk to the table and get them to understand what's going on. Hopefully, I know you mentor a lot of young people, and hopefully one day you'll sit them down and let them listen to one of these interviews that we've been doing. Maybe they may be more interested in hearing any other interviews, but this one, because it's you that's on the interview. So we thank you for being here, and hopefully we can bring you back maybe in 5 years or so, because this is going to be a continuing series that we're going to do. Mm-hmm. We're going to hit on a lot of subjects that people really don't talk about. People don't talk about race, economics, things of that nature. They want to hear the undisputed truth. They're going to hear that here on Access TV. So maybe in 5 years or so, I'll come back. I'll be, hopefully, walking tall, along with you. Maybe I hope we will have to have no Geritol coming in and J. Stan McCauley be meeting us at the door. He has a cane, but we'll come back in 5 years or so and see, where Hartford has come to.
And in the meanwhile, those of us who are here have to keep getting busy every day.
Well, absolutely. And the only way that we can do that is to reach back, get these young folk, develop new leadership, because we don't want to become dinosaurs. Okay, we don't want to become. You and I don't want to become dinosaurs, even though we're close to being that now. But it's very important that each one teach one. Every day you learn. That comes from a saying of a person that I've have been working with, and it's very important that we give back, share what we know, mm-hmm. but it has to be the undisputed truth. It can't be candy coated. It can't be too far to the right, too far to the left. It just has to be the truth, and that's like they said, the truth will set you free. The truth will set you free. Mm-hmm. So, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And like I said, I hope to see you in a few years. And maybe we could talk about the city of Hartford like we talk about the stadium, a gem in the United States of America. Mm-hmm. And throughout the struggles that we have, dealing with this redlining stuff since 100 years ago, we can look back at it one day and say there was no victory without the struggle, but we have a gem here in Hartford, Connecticut.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Cynthia. And thank you, listening audience. And of course, always thank you, Reverend J. Stan McCauley, executive producer of AccessTV.org, where you're going to always hear the undisputed truth.